Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome back to another episode of the Building Blocks Quilt Along. Today we're going to be free motion quilting grid lines. This is our second quilting design for our 4-patch block. So we've got our 4-patch block pieced and ready to go, and I've already gotten started by stitching in the ditch down this center line, and of course I've also secured this outer line too. But here's the deal. This is one of those things, it's like, how do I get around this? I need to stitch this line in the ditch. So how do I get there? Well, the easiest possible way would be to go on ahead and stitch this diagonal line. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. And with all of these straight lines, I'm just keeping this hand, my right hand, parallel with that needle. I'm going to keep my hand slightly closer to the needle and the foot, and I'm just feeding the quilt through the machine, really the way the machine is intended to be used. And that's going to help me I'm making that movement from my body into the machine that's going to help the line stay nice and straight. Now, if you are wiggly wobbly, don't worry about it too much. It's a quilt. It's not the end of the world if your line gets off a little bit. And here's the nice thing about marking these lines. Even if you do get off a little bit, go back and erase your line and no one will know. No one will know that you got off that line that you meant to be on. Okay, so now we're back to stitching in the ditch. And again, another tip for that, just keep your lines parallel. And if you stitch off, let's say you make one stitch off and you're way off. I mean, that's not way off, but if you're way over here, take your hand to the hand wheel and rotate the needle backwards away from you, and rotate the hand wheel backwards. And that will lift the needle up, and then you can rotate forwards and drop it right into the quilt where it needs to go. So that might be helpful if you make a wild stitch off. I often can rescue it simply by that one tip. Just being able to rotate the hand wheel and lift the stitch and turn it, take it back where it needs to go. Okay, so we're going to finish up stitching in the ditch, and then we'll begin stitching these grid lines. Alright, so I'm just taking out my pens and pen moors, and I'm going to back up the camera just a little bit and kind of get a little game plan for what I'm doing in here. And it might be a good idea when you print out your quilting guide for this block to sit down with a pen or pencil and just trace. Figure out where you're going to start. Figure out how you're going to move around the block and spend some time tracing the design. And you can get these full-size quilting guides from the Building Blocks quilt pattern at leahday.com. So we're in this block, and I'm right here. I want to go ahead and get started. So I think I'm going to stitch this diagonal line first, and then I'll probably travel stitch up and kind of do this opposite line, and then work up here and do the, kind of go in like this little square here. Then I can do the same thing right here and finish up with that last line going diagonally. Having a plan, kind of how to move through this area with the least amount of travel stitching is really going to save you some time, because travel stitching, it is time consuming. It is also one of those things that a lot of people obsess about. If you stitch off the travel stitch line, it might be a situation where you want to pick up your seam ripper. Don't do it. You don't need to. But spending that little bit of extra time planning might help you avoid that. So take your time. You don't have to rush. So let's go. I'm going to stitch this straight line down. I'm going to try speeding up just a little bit because we don't want to plod through this whole block. It'll be very time consuming if we do that. I'm just feeding it straight through the machine. Now you might be wondering, I rotate the block quite a bit. Why don't I just use my walking foot? Wouldn't that be easier? And the answer is, for a block like this with all straight lines and sharp angles, you're probably right. But the skill that we're going to gain by free motion quilting these lines is so important. Most free motion quilting, most stitching in the ditch is straight lines and sharp angles. So we really need to learn how to free motion quilt these straight lines so that way we can stitch in the ditch with confidence. So I think it's super, super important to be able to stitch these straight lines easily and stay on that marked line. Whether it's straight or curvy, it's still just a marked line, and we're just trying to stay on top of it. And I will say, even if I didn't have, let's say I was putting this in another quilt, and I wanted straight lines in another quilt, I would still mark it. Please understand that marking these lines is not some kind of cheat. It's not breaking the rules or anything like that. I would mark these lines because if I want something straight, I'm going to most definitely mark it so that way I know what's, where I'm going and how I'm going to get there. And also, having the straight lines marked ensures that the lines are going to be exactly where you want them. Okay, so I'm just going to work my way around. You can see it's just a lot of rotating and stitching, and then there's just little bits of travel stitching. The way I've stitched this, there's just these little bits of travel stitching on the edges of the block, but it's no big deal. Just get those little sections done. And you don't have to rotate as much as I've shown you. There I didn't rotate it. You don't have to rotate it, and sometimes it's nice to get comfortable stitching sideways. It's just a little harder to stitch a straight line in different directions. Okay, so now I'm finishing up my nice diagonal line, and at this point I would probably just go on ahead and come down and continue this diagonal line down into this square and go ahead and fill this up. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to stitch the blue squares. Okay, so after quilting through this section, I ended up here, and this is perfectly fine. Basically what I'm going to do is stitch straight down, travel stitch over, and straight back up, and kind of just do that back and forth all the way to the edge, and then I'll start working horizontally back and forth. And one question that I know you're probably going to have about this section is the density of these lines of stitching. These lines are 1/2 inch apart, and a lot of quilters get really concerned with when the lines of stitching are too close together that it's not going to end up being a soft quilt. So I wanted you to see this. This is the exact same block stitched out 2 times, and this is the quilt block that has cotton batting in the middle, and this is the quilt block that has polyester batting in the middle. And so after both were quilted, I soaked them in hot water, and you can see the cotton batting began to shrink, and that softened it. It's a much softer feel. It's definitely has a drape to it that's very, very nice. It's definitely bed quilt style. The poly definitely softened a little bit, but it didn't have that shrink to it, so it's still going to be a very flat, very smooth finish on the top. If you want an effect where the quilt blocks stay very flat, no wrinkles on the surface, then a poly batting might be something that you want to look into, but you will have slightly stiffer feel. But understand that both of these blocks are quilted identically. This one is considerably softer than the other one. And these areas with 1/2 inch lines of quilting, this 1/2 inch grid, it's still just as soft. And as this is put into the quilt and washed and used, it's going to soften up even more. So don't be afraid of density. Don't be afraid of your lines of quilting being 1/2 inch apart. We're going to have a couple blocks in this quilt where there's certain areas where some lines are 1/4 inch apart. We're going to play with this idea of density and scale. And I really want to encourage you not to be too afraid of it. The quilt, when it's done, is going to be soft. It's going to be cuddly. It's definitely going to be a throw quilt for your couch, something to curl up with. But do understand that how soft it finishes has more to do with your batting than anything else. So make sure if that's what you're wanting, you pick a batting like a cotton batting. That's going to get some shrink to it. It's going to come, shrivel down a little bit, and it's going to give you that soft effect. So I'm going to stitch just a few more lines in this block so you can see what we're going to do in this last section. Basically, I'm just going to stitch down, and these are just straight lines, very, very simple. Straight lines. Now at this point you might be saying, okay, let's do something that's not, I couldn't do with my walking foot. Well, let's travel stitch sideways. This is going to, save us having to rotate it. And then let's stitch back up. Now, just a warning, some machines do not like to stitch in this direction. So if you suddenly get a thread break stitching backwards, that might be why. Your machine just might not like it. And we'll travel stitch over this way. So that's one thing that your walking foot can't do. It can't it can't stitch sideways and it can't stitch backwards, you know, unless you want to hold down the reverse button the whole way. So do understand that learning how to stitch these straight lines in free motion is a very, very important skill to gain. And it's going to help you most specifically for all of those sections where we have to stitch in the ditch to get from one area to another, or just simply to make sure that the back of the block looks as good as the front. So finish up this section simply by stitching these straight lines up and down, and then work sideways. You can rotate your block if you want to, or you can try simply stitching sideways. It's a good challenge to see if you can stitch those straight lines in any direction at all. But do understand that I usually rotate my block simply to make sure the straight lines are straight. It's a personal preference, but that's what I do. So I hope that you will give this Gridlines design a try. We are going to be returning to Gridlines and straight line quilting a lot this year because it's a very important thing to learn. So stick with it, have some fun. So my name is Leah Day, and this has been a video for the Building Blocks Quilt Along. Find your building blocks quilt pattern at leahday.com and join in with us as we learn piecing and free motion quilting in 2014. Until next time, let's go quilt.